Hi, James again. Welcome again to the audio mixing class level 1, the basics. And in this video, we're going to learn more about mixers. And so in the last one, we spoke about, in the last ones, we spoke first about what we were going to talk about within the class itself. We went into some hardware, we looked at audio theory, and then we just looked at some microphone techniques about placing microphones. And now we're going to talk about mixers because it's actually one of the most important things. And so what I did was I kind of grabbed this from the Soundcraft Guide to Mixing. This was back in the day when they were writing this in regards to analog mixing. But what they wrote still applies today, and that is no matter how sophisticated or expensive, all mixers carry out the same basic function: to blend and control the volume of a number of input signals, add effects and processing where required, and route the resulting mix to the appropriate destination. And really, it is the nerve center, and therefore the most vital part of your audio system. And that's true because, the mixer itself is where everything comes in, where everything goes. You have to have a good quality mixer. In this particular case, though, we're not using an analog mixer, we are using a digital one. But I think that, when we look at different types of mixers, there are a number of similarities. And so we're going to start looking at some of them. So as an example, some of the similarities that you might see, might have to do with the actual unit itself. So on the back of it, you'll have, microphone connections, you'll have line connections, mix outputs, maybe your main left and right as well. You might have some stereo outs, maybe some places to put other things like stereo inputs and so on and so forth. So there are a number of connections which are available on the units. And so, such as, mic inputs, line inputs, insert points, gain controls as well, and high pass filters and EQ sections and pan controls and so on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do another spotlight here on the mixer beside me. And so, we do have these different things here. So we do have things like the preamp, the high pass filter, we have a parametric EQ section, we have gates, compressor, and so on and so forth. And we have the channel strips with the faders and so on. We have our output layers as well that we have. And this is our touch screen in here, which allows us to look at the different controls that are available and make other adjustments and so on and so forth. So yeah, there are a number of different things which are available on both. Pan control to be able to change from left to right or center it. You have gates, compression, as I mentioned. You have maybe some FX sort of inserts. In this case, it's soft inserts through the touch panel. There's the different mix outputs. There's pre and after fader levels. In this particular case, it's a combined button, pre and after fader level, called PAFL. You have your mutes, your faders, and even your phantom power. And if we look again at that, so this is where the PAFL is. We have the mutes as well for the channels, and phantom power is available through the screen as well. So now we also have other connections like stereo inputs. We also have things like subgroups. These subgroups might be DCAs, which are digital controlled amplifiers, which allow us to group things before we're sending them to the left, right, or some other areas. And so an example of a subgroup used in a DCA might be, group 1 might be all of the spoken word. Group 2 might be all the vocal microphones for your worship band. Group 3 might be all the instruments for your worship band. Group 4 might be your choir mics and things associated with the choir. And so with that, it allows you to be able to set up your volumes within each group and then afterwards vary the groups as needed. So if the singers and the instruments maybe need a slight adjustment and balance to bring them into equilibrium, it's easier for you to be able to do it as a whole as opposed to trying to individually do several controls. So it's an easy way of doing that. It's also an easy way of turning things off and just by muting a group. So muting the choir group or muting the vocal group or that sort of thing. It's a simple way of taking care of that. So now we're going to look at the startup procedure. If this is the first time you're going to be connecting your mixer especially, you'll need a startup procedure. And so to start off, you want to ensure that all your faders are minimum or in an off position. You want to be able to make sure that, oh, that didn't work. You want to be able to make sure that your, there we go. You want to make sure that all your faders are in the off position. You want to make sure that your inputs and outputs and so on are muted. And you know, the mixer is going to be the first thing you're going to want to turn on. If you have any equalizers, processors, amplifiers, and so on, you want to do that last. You want to connect all your mics, your DI boxes, instruments, etc. If you have phantom power that needs to be turned on, you want to do it then. Leave your faders at minimum. Unmute inputs you're going to use, and unmute and set the output faders at 0. And if you have any groups, unmute and set those to 0 as well. So in this particular case, I have a microphone I want to connect. So I'm going to make that connection on the back of the mixer into my input number 1. And so I have my input muted that I'm going to be using. I can leave the other ones on, it doesn't matter. And so I have my master fader set at 0, but I have my input fader set at minimum. And so now at this point, I'm going to look at what I need to do to set up a basic mix. So a basic mix in this particular case means that I want to set the gain of the input. And so the gain, if I want to start off, if I had something like a CD player, I might want to set it close to 0. And so just to give you an idea of this, I am going to just put on in here in the picture-in-picture. This is a view of the screen of the mixer, and you can see the gain for input 1, where input 1 has been selected, and you can see the gain shows at 28. And if I move the gain knob, you'll notice that that gain varies. And so if I had a CD player, I would want to start off maybe with that gain somewhere near 0. And if I had something like a guitar or a condenser mic, I would want that closer to about 25. Okay, now if I had a bass guitar or I had a dynamic vocal mic, I might want that closer to 35. And in this particular case, what I'm going to be looking at is, or using, is my dynamic microphone. So I'm going to want to change this to 35 to start off with. So I'm going to place that at 35. And I'm going to set my input fader to about -5. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to start off setting my input fader to about -5. And so this is my startup procedure for this particular input. And so I am going to put myself back on so that you can see, and I have my microphone here. I'm going to unmute my input. And I have muted my lavalier microphone, so now you should be hearing this microphone, which I've set up with that initial setting. So this should give you an idea of that, and it's just a starting point. If it runs well and you're not getting any feedback and you think it's about good, then you can bring it up towards 0 at that point, and then you should be more towards that normal level. The reason that we start off at -5 is that microphones have variations in their sensitivity. Some are more sensitive than others, some are less sensitive than others. And this gives you a starting point. When you start at -5, you're going to get the opportunity to turn it on without necessarily being in full-on feedback. So it gives you that chance to kind of at least get it started. Then if you are not experiencing feedback, it can be a little bit louder. You can bring it up to the 0 position. If you need to make adjustments afterwards for that input, because if the input, let's say, is a little bit low or a little bit high or whatnot, you can make adjustments to that as well so that you have, an adjustment on that input. So if I needed to bring that up higher or I needed to bring it lower, then I would have that ability to make those adjustments while maintaining that zero position on the fader. Okay, so that's the idea of that. I'm going to, this was just something to say for us to be able to listen to that, so we did. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use PAFL, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to simulate this for you, but I'm going to do it by using the meters, and that'll give us an idea of how that works. But yeah, there's another way that you can set that up. So I'm back on my lavalier microphone, and with the PAFL, what you can do is you use that in order to set up your input. So I'm going to put my main fader off on the mixer, so my fader for that input is off. I am now going to turn on the PAFL so that I can see the signal and see the PAFL light is lit on the mixer, indicating that that is now listening to that channel only and not everything. Because if that was off at this point, you notice the lights are not flashing, but while it's on, it is working. And so at that point, if you're using the microphone, and I'm going to get within about 3 inches of the microphone, I can turn the gain knob, and as I get up to somewhere in that bottom third somewhere, then I know that that's somewhere I want to be for the volume of this microphone. This is going to be close to where I want to be, is somewhere in that bottom third. And I feel like I'm kind of there, so that's what I'm going to use. And now at this point, I am going to mute my lav mic and bring up the volume on the fader of the mixer. And so I'm bringing up the volume of the mixer, and I now have that set into the 0 position. And that was just by looking at the meters on the fader. And I'm going to switch over to the touch screen on the mixer, and we see that the level is actually 37, which is very close to the 35. And as we learned before, there's a 2 decibel difference. 1 or 2 decibels is kind of imperceivable, so between 35 and 37 means that it's practically the same volume setting. So this gives an idea of another way to set that up using PAFL. I'm going to turn that PAFL off now. But yeah, so that gives you the idea, because you have that sort of fader capability as well as the after fader level capability. PAFL is good for you to use not just for setting up this, but it can also be good for using to listen to things beforehand. Like as an example, if you have music which you need to queue up for your event, someone's going to sing or the kids are going to sing in the play or whatnot, it gives you an opportunity to queue it up to listen. This is the right track. I know what it is. I've used the PAFL. My fader's off. I have my track set properly. I've rewound it. It's ready to press play. And I can, now have it paused. I bring up my volume. It's ready so that when I press play, it's going to play properly. And not only that, because I'm using PAFL and I'm following the rules of being able to set up the volume, I know I'm going to get a good volume as well too, and not be too loud or too soft. So it kind of gives you that opportunity to do that. So this was in order to say, we're going to listen to that, and we did. And now we're going to talk about setting up a basic mix, because it's really just what I've done. And I'm going to switch over to my lav. So setting up a basic mix is really just what we were talking about. Vocals need to be understood clearly, whether it's speech or leading worship. So we need to give priority to vocals when adjusting levels. And if needed, we need to lower the overall level of the instruments if you cannot achieve enough level from the mics. And really that means that if you're kind of struggling, you're on the edge of feedback, you just can't get the mics loud enough, you just can't get enough into them, you might need to turn down all of the instruments, just bring down the overall level in the room. Just make sure that the voice is cut through, because you need to have that ability. Now, at the same time, you may need to also have certain settings on the microphones as well too, in order to help. And we do talk about that in our level 2 classes. Possibly in future videos. Right now it's only classroom based, but maybe in future videos we might also do level 2 in that, but kind of see how that goes. Right now we're still working on level 1. But yeah, we do talk about how to make that better. So we're also going to continue to talk about setting up a basic mix. So when you're mixing voices, select the group baffle if you have a group, and then you can move the input faders until you hear all the voices distinctly. Remember, we spoke about setting up a group, so if you set all the voices in one group, for your worship band, and you set your instruments in another group, then the voices, at that point, it's just a matter of, listening to, the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 voices that are singing. And if you need to, you can do the baffle as well on each individual person to hear them individually, to pick out their voices. And then when you're listening to that group, you hear only that. And so you can then make your adjustments until at a certain point it just clicks. And then you have the group sort of leveled between each other. And then you do the same thing for your instruments. And if you have to, you do the same thing within your choir if you have several choir mics that need to be, for that to be balanced as well too. And at that point, you have your groups, and it's simple for you to adjust your groups up and down in order to make your balance. And so we're going to talk a little bit about equalization. And so I think what we're going to do is, this might be a good time to take a break on this and to kind of wrap up here, pick it up into the next video, because there's a lot of information, and who knows, you might need to rewind some of the things that you've been looking at and just kind of digest it, and then move on at that point as you feel comfortable. So we went through some of the setting up basic mixing, and so now we're going to pick up again in the next one on equalization, which is also part of the same mixing. So look forward to seeing you soon.